What if some of the foods you eat every single day, foods you think are healthy, are actually harming you? And here's the twist. It's not always the foods you expect. In fact, some of the most common healthy choices can spike your blood sugar even faster than white bread. By the end of this video, you'll see how small shifts in what you eat can make a massive difference for your long-term health. Hello, I'm Dr. Nana, and today on Senior Health Boost we're going to talk about the top 10 common foods you're probably eating wrong. Stay with me until the end, and you'll understand why even tiny changes in food choices can completely transform your health. Let's start with food number 10, oats. The big issue here is the glycemic index, which measures how quickly a food turns into blood sugar once you eat it. Glucose, the reference point, scores a perfect 100. Other foods are compared against that. Now, most people already know white bread is not a great choice. It's highly processed, pure starch, and breaks down incredibly fast. White bread has a glycemic index of about 70, already sky high. But here's the surprising part. Quick oats, the kind most people grab in the morning thinking they're healthy, have a glycemic index of 83. Yes, even higher than white bread. On the other hand, steel-cut oats score about 40 to less than half the impact. That's a huge difference. I'm not the biggest fan of grains in general, but if you are going to eat one, I recommend sticking to a gluten-free option. Steel-cut oats can be a decent alternative. To make this visual, imagine colors. Glucose in red, that's dangerously fast. White bread, a deep orange. Quick oats, even darker orange. Steel-cut oats, yellow. Not the best choice if you're reversing a metabolic condition, but if you're healthy, insulin sensitive, and just maintaining, it can be an acceptable option. So why is there such a massive difference between oats and oats? It all comes down to processing. Whole foods are dense, solid, almost like a heavy log on a fire. It takes time to burn down. Enzymes and digestive juices need longer to break them apart, so they release sugar more slowly. But once you roll oats, flatten them, treat them with heat and moisture, they cook faster and digest much quicker. Steel-cut oats might take 45 minutes to cook, rolled oats only 4-5 minutes, and instant oats, just 1 minute. The faster they cook, the faster they digest, and the quicker they flood your bloodstream with sugar. This principle applies across the board with processed foods. Think about fruit compared to fruit juice. Whole fruit contains fiber and structure it takes time to digest. Juice, on the other hand, is stripped of fiber, broken down, and hits your bloodstream almost instantly. It may look like the same food, but your body processes it completely differently. Now let's move to food number 9, lectins. Unlike animals, plants can't run away or fight back with claws and teeth. Instead, they use a kind of chemical defense. They produce proteins that irritate the digestive system and discourage animals from eating them. For some people, these compounds barely register. For others, they can be life-changing in how they affect health. One group of these lectin-containing foods is called nightshades. This includes tomatoes, bell peppers, and eggplant. For most people, these foods are perfectly healthy even on low-carb or keto diets. But for those sensitive to lectins, they can be irritating and problematic. Potatoes fall into a yellow category. They're high in starch, and while not inherently bad, they're not ideal if you're trying to reverse a metabolic condition. If you're healthy and insulin sensitive, enjoying them occasionally isn't a big deal. But if you're working on recovery, potatoes are best limited. Then we have beans, also marked yellow because they're notoriously hard to digest. And quinoa, which many people mistakenly believe is a grain substitute. In reality, it's a seed, but it behaves like a grain because it's loaded with carbohydrates, about 57% carbs by dry weight. That makes it almost as carb-heavy as wheat or rice. Finally, there's corn. Many people think of corn as a vegetable, but it's technically a grain. It's also one of the most common allergens and often genetically modified. That's why it falls into the orange category, not something I recommend if you're working toward better metabolic health. And this is just the beginning. We've covered oats, lectins, and some of the surprising truths behind foods we often consider healthy. But as we move forward, the list gets even more eye-opening. In the last section, we talked about lectins, how plants use them as a chemical defense, and how some people are more sensitive than others. We also saw that processing methods, like pressure cooking, can help reduce their impact. Now let's continue with the next foods on the list, because the surprises only get bigger from here. Food number 8 is peanut butter. Now, peanuts are not actually nuts, they're legumes. And because they're legumes, They are much harder to digest than true nuts like almonds or walnuts. Just like beans, peanuts naturally contain lectins, those same proteins we mentioned before, which can irritate the digestive system for certain people. So why are peanuts and peanut butter so popular? It's because peanuts are higher in fat and protein compared to most legumes, which makes them both filling and satisfying. Peanut butter, in particular, has become a go-to food, especially in the low-carb community, because it feels rich, indulgent, and energy-dense. But here's the catch. If you're going to include peanuts or peanut butter in your diet, there are a few rules you absolutely must follow. First, it needs to be organic and as close to unprocessed as possible. That means the natural kind, the one where the oil separates on top because nothing artificial has been added. Ideally, the ingredient list should be nothing but peanuts, maybe with a touch of salt. That's it. If you can tolerate peanuts and you're not sensitive to lectins, then natural, unprocessed peanut butter can be a reasonably healthy option. It provides good protein, healthy fats, and a decent level of satiety. However, if we're talking about the big commercial brands, the ones that have been on grocery store shelves for decades, that's a whole different story. These products often come loaded with corn syrup, sugar, soy proteins, and emulsifiers. And let's not forget the hydrogenated oils, which create trans fats, some of the most damaging fats you can put into your body. That's why, overall, I would give peanut butter an orange rating. Natural peanut butter on its own has redeeming qualities, but the processed, commercial versions, the ones filled with sugar and trans fats, earn a big, bold red for being toxic and harmful. Now, let's move on to food number 7, seeds, specifically hemp, chia, and flax. What makes these seeds so interesting is that they are among the very highest plant sources of omega-3 fatty acids. In fact, there are only a handful of plant foods that contain any omega-3s at all, and hemp, chia, and flax top that list. Most people have heard of omega-3s as being nothing but good for health. And yes, we do need them, but here's where it gets complicated. Omega-3 fatty acids are a type of polyunsaturated fat, and while they are important in small amounts, they are also extremely fragile. They are highly sensitive to heat, light, and oxygen. So just how sensitive are they? Let me give you an example that will make it crystal clear. If we compare alpha-linolenic acid, the plant-based omega-3 found in these seeds, with a saturated fatty acid from animal foods, studies show that the omega-3 is about 2,500 times more sensitive to oxidation and damage. That's a huge number, and it can be hard to wrap your head around. So let's put it in perspective. Imagine a piece of saturated fat, like the fat you find in meat. It might take a whole year for it to oxidize and go rancid. Now compare that to omega-3. The same level of damage that takes saturated fat 1 year to accumulate can happen to omega-3 in just 3.5 hours. Think about that. It means that as soon as you break the shell of these seeds, whether by grinding them, crushing them, or turning them into oil, the clock starts ticking. Within minutes, the omega-3s begin to degrade. Within a few hours, they're already significantly damaged. Now, here's the good news. Nature designed these seeds with built-in protection. As long as the seeds remain whole and intact, their delicate fats are shielded from oxygen and light. That's why you can store whole hemp, chia, or flax seeds at room temperature for weeks, sometimes even months, and they'll still be fresh. But once you grind them, everything changes. The protective shell is gone, and oxidation starts immediately. That's why, if you're going to use these seeds, the best approach is to buy them whole, grind them yourself in small amounts, and store them in the refrigerator or freezer right away. This way, you minimize exposure and preserve the beneficial omega-3s as much as possible. This raises a really important point about how we treat food in general. Just because something is marketed as healthy doesn't mean it stays healthy once it's processed. A bag of ground flaxseed sitting on the grocery shelf for months under bright lights? By the time you buy it, most of its omega-3 content could already be oxidized, leaving you with a product that does more harm than good. So the takeaway here is simple. Whole seeds are safe and stable. But if you want the real nutritional benefit, grind them fresh and consume them quickly. We've now covered peanut butter, and seeds like hemp, chia, and flax, and already you can see how much food quality and processing matter. Something as simple as natural vs processed can be the difference between nourishing your body and damaging it. In the last section, we talked about seeds like hemp, chia, and flax, how they're valuable for their omega-3 content, but also extremely fragile if not handled properly. Now let's turn to the next group on the list. Nuts. There's a lot of debate about how we should eat nuts. Some say raw is best. Others suggest soaking them, while some argue roasting or toasting is fine. So what actually happens inside the fats that make up these nuts? To answer that, let's step back to the basics of fat chemistry. A saturated fatty acid is essentially a straight chain. Each carbon atom is connected in a way that leaves no room for extra bonds. Because of this, saturated fats are very stable. They don't have vulnerable points where oxygen can attack, which means they resist damage from heat or light. These fats are solid at room temperature, think butter or coconut oil. A monounsaturated fatty acid has one double bond in its chain. That makes it a little more flexible, slightly less stable than saturated fat, but still relatively resistant to damage. Olive oil is a good example of this type of fat. At room temperature, it's liquid, but it can turn cloudy or semi-solid in the fridge. Many nuts contain a lot of monounsaturated fats. Next we have omega-6 fatty acids. These are polyunsaturated fats with two double bonds. They're more fragile than monounsaturated fats, more prone to oxidation, and therefore more sensitive to heat. Most nuts contain significant amounts of omega-6s. Then there are omega-3 fatty acids, which have three double bonds. These are even more unstable and can become damaged very quickly. While most nuts only contain tiny amounts of omega-3s, about 1 or 2%, the walnut stands out. Walnuts contain around 10% omega-3s, making them unique among nuts. But this also means walnuts are much more delicate and should not be roasted or toasted. They spoil and oxidize faster than almost any other nut. Now let's compare these two fish oils. Components like EPA and DHA are polyunsaturated fatty acids with 5 or 6 double bonds. Instead of a relatively straight chain, these molecules bend and twist so much that they look more like squiggles. That's why fish oils are incredibly reactive to oxygen and heat, even more than plant-based omega-3s. So where does that leave nuts? Most nuts are a mixture of monounsaturated fats, omega-6s, and a little bit of omega-3s. Walnuts, again, are the highest in omega-3s, but that also makes them the most fragile. By contrast, macadamia nuts are almost entirely monounsaturated and saturated fats, with virtually no omega-6 or omega-3. This makes macadamias the most stable of all nuts, and the only ones truly safe to roast without much risk of damaging the fat. But the story doesn't end with fat content. Nuts, like other plants, also contain anti-nutrients. These include phytates, enzyme inhibitors, and lectins, compounds that help protect the plant but can interfere with digestion in humans. For example, walnuts contain notable amounts of these substances. So how do you reduce their impact? One common method is soaking. When you soak nuts in water for 12 to 24 hours, you neutralize many of these anti-nutrients. The result is a nut that's easier to digest and less irritating to your system. Of course, soaking leaves you with wet nuts, and you need to dry them. But you need to be careful with how you do it. Using a high-temperature oven can easily damage the delicate fats we just talked about. Instead, the best option is a dehydrator, which slowly removes the water without exposing the nuts to damaging heat. If you must use an oven, keep the temperature very low and give them time to dry gently. So when it comes to nuts, here's the bottom line. Walnuts are nutrient-rich but fragile. Eat them raw or soaked and dried, never roasted. Most other nuts contain high amounts of omega-6s. They're moderately heat-sensitive, so gentle handling is key. Macadamias are the exception. With their stable fat profile, they can be safely roasted and still retain their quality. Nuts can be a great food when handled properly, but their benefits depend heavily on how you prepare and store them. In the last section, we looked at nuts, how soaking, drying, and careful preparation can help preserve nutrients and reduce harmful compounds. Now, let's move forward and talk about two categories of foods that stir up constant debate: mayonnaise and dressings, and then eggs and chicken. Food number 5, mayonnaise and salad dressings. At first glance, mayo seems harmless. After all, it's creamy, satisfying, and often paired with healthy foods like salads. But here's the problem. Most commercial mayonnaise is made with oils that are extremely high in omega-6 fatty acids. Now, nuts also contain omega-6s, but in nuts they come as part of a whole food balanced with protein, fiber, minerals, and other nutrients. In mayo and dressings, omega-6s appear in an isolated, concentrated form. The rest of the nutrition has been stripped away, leaving only a heavy dose of unstable fat. And it gets worse. These oils are not just concentrated, they're also harshly processed. They go through high heat, high pressure, and chemical treatments. To remove unpleasant flavors and smells, manufacturers deodorize, bleach, and degum the oils. By the time the process is done, there's almost nothing left of the seed or nut they originally came from. The result? Oils that are damaged, oxidized, and harmful. Does that mean one spoonful of mayo will wreck your health? Not exactly. If you eat it once in a while, say, a tablespoon or two once a month, it's not nearly as bad as eating sugar or donuts daily. But as a regular habit, commercial mayo and dressings are far from healthy. So, what's the alternative? Make your own. The health value of homemade mayo comes down to the oil you use. The best choice, hands down, is organic extra virgin olive oil. It's rich in antioxidants, stable, and far healthier than processed seed oils. The challenge? Its strong flavor. Most people who try mayo made with olive oil find it overpowering and don't go back for seconds. If you love it, that's great, stick with it. But if you don't, the next best option is to use another cold-pressed oil. Avocado oil and walnut oil can both work. Just keep in mind, the less processed the oil, the stronger its natural flavor will be. That means the healthier the oil, the more noticeable the taste in your mayo. It's always a trade-off. The best compromise for most people? A filtered, cold-pressed avocado oil. It has a mild flavor, doesn't overpower the recipe, and avoids the heavy damage of highly refined oils. If you choose wisely, you can enjoy mayo without loading your body with toxic fats. Now let's turn to food number 4, eggs and chicken. Few foods are surrounded by as much confusion as eggs and poultry. For decades, people were told eggs were unhealthy because of cholesterol. Today, most experts agree that eggs are highly nutritious. But the real question isn't whether eggs are good, it's how they're produced. Let's break down the common labels you see at the store. Caged. These are the lowest standard. The birds live in small, cramped cages with almost no movement. Their environment is stressful, and their feed is low quality. Unsurprisingly, the eggs from caged hens are the least nutritious and often contain more inflammatory fats. Cage-free. This sounds better, but in reality, it's only a small improvement. The birds aren't kept in individual cages, but they're still indoors, packed tightly together, with very little room to move. The conditions are still far from natural. Free range. This label sounds ideal, like chickens roaming freely outdoors on green pastures. But here's the truth. In most commercial operations, free range just means the birds are housed in large barns with theoretical access to the outside. There might be a small door and a tiny patch of grass. In practice, most birds never go out. They remain crowded indoors, just like cage-free chickens. So what does this mean for your health? The environment and diet of the chicken directly affect the nutrition of the egg. Chickens raised in cramped conditions and fed grain-heavy diets produce eggs higher in omega-6s and lower in omega-3s. On the other hand, pasture-raised chickens, those that actually forage outdoors, produce eggs richer in nutrients, including higher levels of omega-3s, vitamin D, and antioxidants. The same applies to chicken meat. Birds raised in industrial systems are fattier, less nutritious, and often exposed to antibiotics and additives. Pasture-raised or organically raised chickens, though more expensive, provide far healthier meat. So while marketing terms like cage-free or free-range sound reassuring, they're often little more than labels. The real key is pasture-raised chickens that spend time outside, eat a natural diet, and live in lower-stress environments. That's where you get the best nutrition for your body. Eggs and chicken can absolutely be part of a healthy diet, but the quality matters more than the label. In the last section, we explored how labels like cage-free or free-range don't always mean what you think. To truly get quality eggs and chicken, the standard you want to look for is pasture-raised. Pasture-raised means the birds spend most of their time outdoors, with space to roam about 108 square feet per bird in the United States. This ensures they can eat a more natural diet, live in lower stress conditions, and produce eggs and meat far richer in nutrients. If you don't see that standard, the best step is to trace your eggs back to the source. Find a local farmer, a neighbor, or even raise your own chickens if your space and community allow it. However, those birds are treated, that's what you're ultimately eating. Food number 3. Fish. Fish can be either one of the healthiest foods on your plate or one of the riskiest. It depends entirely on how it's raised, cooked, and selected. First, Avoid farmed fish. In confined conditions, farmed fish move very little, suffer from lice and disease, and are often fed low-quality feed. Naturally, their health suffers, and that poor quality transfers to you when you eat them. Second, be cautious with cooking methods. Remember those omega-3 fatty acids EPA and DA we talked about earlier? They're incredibly delicate. Overheating fish destroys these fragile fats. That's why you should always cook fish gently, on low heat, to preserve the nutrients. The third issue is mercury. Oceans are polluted, and larger, older, predatory fish accumulate mercury over time. The rule is simple: the bigger and longer a fish lives, the more mercury it contains. Shark, swordfish, and large tuna are among the worst offenders. So which fish are safe and beneficial? Smaller species like salmon, sardines, mackerel except king mackerel, and small flatfish. Choose wild-caught when possible. Cook them gently, and these fish can provide a powerhouse of nutrition. In fact, enjoyed 2 or 3 times a week, they can be one of the best protein sources in your diet. Food number 2. Meat. Most meat in the U.S. comes from grain-fed animals. Cattle are meant to eat grass, but in feedlots they're fed grain, corn, and soy. This unnatural diet changes the fat in their tissues, creating high levels of omega-6 fatty acids, which promote inflammation in your body. There's also the ethical and health issue of confinement. Many animals are kept in poor conditions, stressed, and frequently exposed to antibiotics. Officially, antibiotic use is downplayed, but the reality is that massive amounts are sold for livestock feed each year. That said, meat itself is not the problem. Grass-fed, organic, humanely raised meat is completely different. Animals that eat grass and live naturally produce healthier fat, more nutrients, and fewer toxins. That meat can be an excellent source of nutrition. And here's an important perspective: even grain-fed meat is still better than many processed foods. If you're at a restaurant and your choice is between grain-fed beef or something fried and ultra-processed like chicken nuggets, fries, or donuts, the beef will still be the far better option. It's about relativity and making the best choice available to you. Food number 1. Milk, yogurt, and dairy. Dairy is one of the most common foods in modern diets. Many people believe it's a cornerstone of health, but not all dairy is equal. The first issue is pasteurization. From a public health perspective, pasteurization reduces the risk of acute diseases, which is why it became standard. But there's a trade-off. It also reduces the nutritional value and long-term health benefits. In other words, it protects against immediate risks but contributes to broader chronic problems in the population. Pasteurization is just one part of the story, and we'll dig deeper into the rest in the next section. We've talked about eggs, chicken, fish, and meat, and now we come to one of the most debated foods in modern nutrition: milk, yogurt, and dairy. Here's the issue. Most people think dairy is automatically healthy, but the way it's processed makes a huge difference. The key process is pasteurization. From a public health standpoint, pasteurization is meant to reduce immediate risk. If you kill off dangerous bacteria in milk, you lower the chance of foodborne illness. But what gets lost in this discussion is that pasteurization also damages the very qualities that make milk beneficial in the first place. Think about how we perceive disasters. A plane crash that kills 300 people grabs headlines instantly. It's shocking, dramatic, and visible. But a slow, silent health crisis like the decline in population health caused by processed dairy rarely makes the news. It creeps in quietly, year after year, until the damage is enormous. Here's what really happens during pasteurization. The heat doesn't just destroy harmful bacteria, it wipes out beneficial bacteria too. In raw milk, you naturally find lactobacillus, a name that literally comes from lactic, meaning milk. These good bacteria help you digest lactose and improve gut health. Pasteurization eliminates them. It also destroys enzymes that are critical for breaking down milk's nutrients. Without those enzymes, milk becomes harder to digest. And that's ironic, because raw milk straight from the source is actually much more tolerable for many people. Calves drink raw milk from their mothers. Human babies drink raw milk from theirs. Neither needs pasteurization, because nature designed milk with the enzymes and bacteria that make it digestible. So what's the solution if you don't have access to raw milk? You can restore many of the lost benefits by turning milk into cultured foods like yogurt, sour cream, or kefir. These processes add back live bacteria and enzymes, creating something very close to what raw milk originally offered. Here's how yogurt is typically made. 1. First, the milk is heated to kill off harmful bacteria, preparing it for culturing. 2. Then specific strains of bacteria, often including lactobacillus, are added. 3. These bacteria multiply, forming a live, active culture. 4. As they grow, they consume lactose, the natural sugar in milk. This is a powerful transformation. Lactose is one of the main reasons people struggle with dairy digestion. When bacteria reduce the lactose, yogurt becomes easier to tolerate even for those who are sensitive. At the same time, the bacteria produce lactic acid, which gives yogurt its sour flavor and increases its health benefits. The longer the culture ferments, the more sugar is consumed, and the tangier the yogurt becomes. That soreness is actually a sign of quality. It tells you the yogurt is rich in live bacteria and lower in sugar. But here's the part most people don't realize. If yogurt doesn't taste sour, it probably doesn't have meaningful amounts of beneficial bacteria. Many commercial yogurts are deliberately cultured for a shorter time, leaving more sugar intact and fewer probiotics. To make matters worse, manufacturers often load them with extra sugar, artificial sweeteners, and flavorings. These fruit on the bottom or candy-like yogurts can contain more sugar than a soda. At that point, whatever benefit you might get from probiotics is completely overshadowed by the sugar content. So, while plain sour yogurt can be a genuinely healthy food, most of the brightly packaged yogurts in grocery stores are little more than dessert disguised as health food. Now, what about raw milk? Today, in some states, you can still buy raw milk, but often it's sold only for pets, labeled as not for human consumption. People buy it for their cats or dogs. I sometimes joke that I've bought gallons of pet milk for my cat, only to realize when I get home that I don't even own a cat. Maybe one day I'll remember to pick one up. But the point is, raw milk is still out there, but laws around it vary depending on where you live. So where does all of this leave us? Let's bring everything together. Pasteurization may make milk safer in the short term, but it strips away the bacteria and enzymes that make it truly beneficial. Culturing milk into yogurt, kefir, or sour cream restores much of what was lost, creating a more digestible and probiotic-rich food. Quality matters. Sour, plain yogurt with live cultures is a health food. Sugar-laden, artificial yogurt is just another processed product. Perspective matters. The way your food is raised, processed, and prepared makes all the difference, not just for dairy, but for eggs, chicken, fish, meat, and everything else we've covered. And that brings us to the end of this journey through the top foods you might be eating wrong. If there's one lesson to take away, it's this: real food prepared properly will always serve your health better than processed imitations. So here's my challenge to you. Next time you're at the store, take a moment to look beyond the labels and the marketing. Ask yourself, is this food real? Has it been stripped of its natural qualities? Is it closer to how nature intended, or has it been engineered for convenience and shelf life? Those questions could be the difference between nourishing your body and slowly harming it. I'm Dr. Nana, and I want to thank you for watching and learning with me here on Senior Health Boost. If this video helped you see food in a new light, do me a favor, click the like button, subscribe to Senior Health Boost, and turn on the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss another life-saving tip. Share this with a friend or family member too, because small changes in food choices can add up to a lifetime of better health. Remember, health isn't about perfection, it's about awareness, consistency, and choosing foods that truly serve your body. Stay curious, stay committed, and I'll see you in the next video.